Dr. Sarah Kim left the stage after her talk about psychological manipulation. The three aliens sat in their chairs feeling more disturbed than they had ever felt before. Each human speaker had revealed knowledge that should have been impossible for a peaceful species to possess. Jake Morrison walked back to the microphone one final time. The sun was setting and lights had been turned on around the town square. The warm glow made everything look friendly and safe, but the aliens no longer believed in human innocence. "We have one last storyteller tonight," Jake announced. "Lisa Chen served in our military for 15 years before returning home to Cedar Falls. She has stories from conflicts that happened in distant places." A woman in her mid-40s stepped onto the stage. Lisa Chen had short black hair streaked with gray and walked with the confident posture of a trained soldier. Her eyes were calm but alert, constantly scanning the crowd out of old habit. Captain Zethkar studied Lisa carefully. Finally, they would hear from an actual human warrior. Perhaps she would reveal the true nature of human military capability. "Good evening," Lisa said in a clear, strong voice. "Tonight I want to share stories about the wars humans have fought among ourselves. These tales might help our visitors understand who we really are." Lisa began telling about battles fought on distant worlds. She described conflicts between human colonies that disagreed about how to live and govern themselves. Her stories were filled with details about strategy, tactics, and survival. In one war, Lisa said, human forces faced an enemy that seemed impossible to defeat. The enemy soldiers were larger, stronger, and better armed. They had natural armor and enhanced senses that made them superior fighters. Dr. Malrix felt a chill of recognition. Lisa was describing creatures that sounded exactly like the Vorthak species. But how could humans have fought against beings like Captain Zethkar? The human commanders studied their enemy carefully, Lisa continued. They learned about enemy biology, psychology, and social structure. They discovered weaknesses that even the enemy did not know they had. Lisa described how human forces had used mobility and intelligence to defeat stronger opponents. They avoided direct confrontation and instead attacked supply lines and communication networks. They turned the enemy's strength into a disadvantage. The enemy relied on fear and intimidation, Lisa explained. So human forces found ways to operate without fear. They used psychological techniques to remain calm under pressure. They turned terror into a tool for focus and determination. Commander Theiss began to tremble. Lisa was describing exactly how his own people could be defeated. She spoke about tactics that would work against Fenrari hunting methods with disturbing accuracy. Lisa told another story about humans fighting spider-like creatures that used poison and web traps. She described how human soldiers had learned to predict enemy movements and avoid their deadly attacks. The spider creatures thought they were the perfect hunters, Lisa said, but humans studied their hunting patterns until they became predictable. We learned to use their own tactics against them. Dr. Malrix realized that Lisa was describing warfare against creatures exactly like her own species. Every weakness and vulnerability that Lisa mentioned was real. The humans somehow knew things that should have been impossible to discover. In another conflict, Lisa continued, humans faced wolf-like enemies that hunted in packs and used enhanced senses to track their prey. These creatures seemed unstoppable in their natural environment. Lisa described how human forces had learned to confuse enhanced senses with false signals. They had developed ways to mask their scent and heat signatures. They had turned the hunter's own abilities into sources of confusion and misdirection. Captain Zethkar felt his confidence crumbling. Lisa was describing exactly how to defeat creatures like Commander Theiss with methods that were both brilliant and terrifying in their effectiveness. The key to human success, Lisa said calmly, was never trying to outfight superior predators. Instead, we learned to outthink them. We studied them until we understood them better than they understood themselves. Lisa paused and looked directly at the three alien visitors. Her gaze was steady and knowing. The aliens realized that she was speaking to them, not just telling stories to the human audience. Every species has patterns, Lisa continued. Biological limitations, psychological weaknesses, social structures that can be exploited. Humans have always been good at finding these weaknesses and using them. Dr. Malrix began scanning with her equipment frantically. She needed to know if humans had been studying them during the festival. Her machines detected hidden recording devices throughout the town square. "We have been monitored," she whispered to her companions. "They have been studying us all evening." Lisa smiled as if she had heard the whispered comment. Humans have been listening to galactic communications for many years. We have learned about different species throughout this part of space. We know who they are and how they think. Captain Zethkar felt terror for the first time in his adult life. The humans had been watching and studying alien species before making contact. This entire festival had been a demonstration of human knowledge about alien psychology and tactics. Every story told tonight, Lisa continued, was based on real intelligence about real species. We wanted our visitors to understand that humans are not helpless prey animals waiting to be conquered. Jake Morrison joined Lisa on the stage. He no longer looked like a simple communications officer. His friendly smile had been replaced by the calm confidence of someone who held all the advantages. "We invited you here to learn about human culture," Jake said to the aliens. "Tonight you discovered that human culture includes the systematic study of potential threats. Every story, every tale, every piece of fiction was really a lesson in how we analyze and defeat superior predators." Lisa nodded in agreement. "Humans don't fear apex predators because we have spent thousands of years learning how to defeat them. We turn everything, including our own fears, into tools for understanding our enemies." The three aliens finally understood the horrible truth. They had not discovered a weak species ripe for conquest. They had found the apex predators of apex predators. Humans were the species that studied, analyzed, and ultimately defeated every other form of life they encountered. "Your ships are being scanned right now," Jake added casually. "Our satellites have been recording everything since you entered our solar system. We know how your technology works and how to counter it." Captain Zethkar stood up on shaking legs. His proud warrior species had been reduced to laboratory specimens being studied by creatures they had assumed were harmless. "We must leave," he said to his companions. "Immediately." Lisa smiled one final time. "You're welcome to go, but remember that humans will be watching. We'll be studying you and learning from this encounter. And we'll be ready if you ever decide to return with hostile intentions." The three aliens fled toward their shuttle as fast as they could move. Behind them, the humans of Cedar Falls continued their storytelling festival as if nothing unusual had happened. In space, Captain Zethkar sent a message to all alien forces in the galaxy. Earth was to be marked as a quarantine zone. Humans were not prey. They were the hunters of hunters, and they had turned storytelling into the most terrifying weapon in the universe. Amy Collins finished her stories about urban monsters and walked off the stage. The audience clapped, but many people looked around nervously. Even though they knew the stories were fiction, Amy's words had made them think about real dangers hiding in their world. The three aliens sat frozen in their chairs. A human child had just explained hunting techniques that would make experienced warriors proud. But Amy had spoken about these deadly methods like they were games. Jake Morrison returned to the microphone. "Thank you, Amy, for those chilling tales. Next, we have Danny Rodriguez, who works as a firefighter here in town. Danny has some stories passed down from his grandfather who served in the military." A strong man with dark skin and graying hair walked onto the stage. Danny Rodriguez was 42 years old and had spent 20 years fighting fires and saving lives. His grandfather had fought in wars before Danny was born, and the old man had shared his memories before he died. "Good evening, folks," Danny said, in a calm voice. "My grandfather used to tell me stories about the wars he fought in. He said it was important to remember what happened so we could learn from it. Captain Zethkar expected to finally hear about human military tactics. Perhaps these stories would explain how such weak creatures had survived long enough to reach the stars. Danny began telling about a battle his grandfather had described. Human soldiers were trapped on a hill surrounded by enemies. They had little food, no water, and their weapons were running low. The enemy thought they had won, Danny said. They figured the humans would surrender or die within a few days. But my grandfather's unit did something unexpected. Dr. Malrix leaned forward to listen carefully. Maybe now she would understand how humans fought when they faced superior forces. Instead of trying to fight their way out, Danny continued, the soldiers decided to study their enemy first. They watched how the enemy moved. They learned their patterns and habits. They figured out when the guards changed and where the weak spots were. Commander Thiss felt a chill run through his fur. Danny was describing intelligence-gathering methods that required patience and careful observation. Most species either fought or ran when trapped. Humans apparently did neither. My grandfather said the key to survival was not being stronger or faster, Danny explained. It was being smarter. Understanding your enemy better than they understood themselves. Danny told how the human soldiers spent days watching and learning. They memorized guard schedules. They studied supply routes. They analyzed enemy behavior until they could predict what would happen next. Then they started psychological warfare, Danny said matter-of-factly. They used the enemy's own tactics against them. They made the enemy paranoid and confused. The aliens exchanged worried looks. Danny was describing advanced military strategy with the same casual tone other humans had used for fairy tales. Danny explained how his grandfather's unit had created fear in their enemies. They left false evidence of larger forces nearby. They used sound and shadows to make the enemy think they were surrounded. They turned the hunters into the hunted. Fear is a powerful weapon, Danny said to the listening crowd. When you understand what scares your enemy, you can control them without firing a shot. Captain Zethkar realized that Danny was teaching the same psychological manipulation techniques the aliens had used to conquer worlds. But the humans spoke about them like they were basic knowledge every person should know. The story continued with the trapped soldiers gradually weakening their enemy through careful psychological pressure. They made the enemy doubt their own strength. They created confusion and mistrust among enemy ranks. By the time my grandfather's unit broke out, Danny said, the enemy was so confused and frightened they barely fought back. Most of them ran away instead of standing their ground. Danny finished his story, and the audience nodded with understanding. They seemed to accept that humans could defeat superior forces through intelligence and psychological manipulation. Dr. Malrix began to feel something she had never experienced before. Her species had conquered many worlds by using fear and superior firepower. But these humans talked about defeating such tactics like it was normal. Jake introduced the next speaker. Now we have Dr. Sarah Kim, who works as a psychiatrist in the city nearby. She studies how the human mind works, and she has some interesting stories to share. A woman in her 40s with short black hair stepped onto the stage. Dr. Sarah Kim had spent years studying human psychology and helping people with mental problems. She understood how minds worked and could be influenced. Hello, everyone, Sarah said with a professional smile. I want to talk about psychological thrillers. These are stories that explore how people can be manipulated and controlled through mental pressure. Sarah began telling stories about mind games and psychological manipulation. She described how skilled manipulators could control other people, without them knowing it was happening. The best psychological manipulators, Sarah explained, understand their targets completely. They know what people fear, what they want, and what they need. Then they use this knowledge to control behavior. The three aliens felt growing horror as Sarah casually described techniques they used to break the will of conquered populations. But she spoke about these methods like they were subjects studied in human schools. Sarah told stories about people who could read body language and vocal patterns to understand hidden thoughts. She described how trained humans could detect lies and hidden emotions through tiny physical signals. Humans are naturally social creatures, Sarah said. We have evolved to read each other's mental states very accurately. This makes us good at understanding when someone is trying to deceive us. Commander Theiss realized that Sarah was explaining why the aliens had felt uncomfortable around humans. These creatures could read emotional states and detect hostile intentions through natural abilities. Sarah continued with stories about psychological profiling and behavioral prediction. She described how humans could analyze someone's personality and predict their future actions with frightening accuracy. When you understand how a mind works, Sarah said calmly, you can influence it in subtle ways. The target never realizes they are being guided toward specific choices. Dr. Malrix felt her confidence cracking. Her species relied on fear and intimidation to control others. But these humans had developed methods of control that were far more sophisticated and harder to detect. Sarah finished her presentation by explaining how psychological manipulation could be used for good or evil. She said humans studied these techniques to protect themselves from being controlled by others. The aliens finally understood the terrible truth. Humans were not prey animals who had stumbled into intelligence. They were predators who specialized in hunting other predators, and they had been studying their alien visitors all along. Helen Porter left the stage and the crowd clapped politely. The three aliens sat quietly thinking about what they had just heard. The old woman's story about the wolf contained information that should not exist in a peaceful species. Jake Morrison stood up and walked to the microphone. Thank you, Helen. Next, we have Ben Carter, who teaches at our local high school. Ben loves to tell scary stories that will make you afraid to sleep tonight. A tall man with dark hair and glasses stepped onto the stage. Ben Carter was 35 years old and had been teaching teenagers for 10 years. He enjoyed telling ghost stories and urban legends that made his students jump in their seats. Good evening, everyone, Ben said with a grin. Tonight I want to tell you about something that happened in the old forest outside town. Some say it was just imagination. Others believe every word is true. Captain Zethkar leaned forward in his dull chair. Maybe this human would tell a real story about actual events. The alien captain wanted to understand how humans dealt with real danger. Ben began his tale. He spoke about a group of campers who went into the deep woods 50 years ago. They set up their tents near a stream and built a fire to cook their dinner. Everything seemed normal and peaceful. But as the sun went down, Ben said, they started to hear sounds in the forest, branches breaking, leaves rustling. Something was moving out there in the darkness. Dr. Malrix's 8 eyes focused on the human storyteller. Ben was describing the movements of a large predator stalking prey. His details were too accurate for someone who had never experienced real hunting. The campers tried to ignore the sounds. At first, Ben continued, they told themselves it was just the wind or maybe a deer, but the sounds got closer, and they started to follow a pattern. Commander Theiss felt his fur stand up on the back of his neck. Ben was explaining how predators used psychological pressure to weaken their prey before attacking. This was advanced hunting knowledge. The creature in the forest was patient, Ben said. It did not rush in for a quick kill. Instead, it circled the camp slowly. It let the humans hear just enough to know something was there. Fear is a weapon that makes prey easier to catch. The 3 aliens looked at each other with growing alarm. This human teacher was describing tactics that their own species used in warfare, but he spoke about them like they were entertainment for children. Ben's voice got quieter as he described how the campers grew more frightened. He explained how fear made them make mistakes, how terror could paralyze a creature or make it run blindly into danger. The thing in the forest understood human psychology, Ben said. It knew that humans imagine things worse than reality when they are scared. So it stayed hidden and let their own minds become the enemy. Dr. Malrix began scanning the area with her sensitive equipment. Ben was describing psychological warfare techniques with perfect accuracy, but her machines showed No signs of any actual threats nearby. The campers huddled around their fire, Ben continued. They took turns staying awake to watch for danger. But staying awake for too long makes the mind weak. The creature knew this and waited for them to become tired and confused. Captain Zethkar realized that Ben was explaining sleep deprivation, tactics used by military forces across the galaxy. How could a simple human teacher know such things? Ben described how the sounds in the forest changed as the night went on. Sometimes they came from the north, then from the south. The creature was moving around the camp to confuse the humans about where it really was. Misdirection is a powerful tool, Ben explained to his audience. When prey cannot tell where danger is coming from, they waste energy watching the wrong places. Commander Thias wanted to howl in frustration. Ben was teaching tactical deception methods that took Thias's own people years to master, but the humans spoke about them like they were common knowledge. The story reached its climax when one of the campers finally saw the creature. Ben described glowing eyes and moving shadows. He talked about the moment when prey finally faces its hunter. But here's the strange part, Ben said with a smile. When morning came, the campers found no tracks, no signs that anything had been there at all. Maybe the creature was real. Maybe it was just their imagination fed by fear and darkness. The human audience murmured and whispered to each other. Some looked scared while others seemed excited by the mystery. Children moved closer to their parents. But the aliens felt something very different. They realized that Ben had just demonstrated how humans could create fear without any actual threat. He had weaponized imagination itself. Dr. Malrich's sensors showed that many humans in the audience were experiencing real fear responses. Their heart rates had increased and stress chemicals filled their blood. Ben had triggered genuine terror using only words. How is this possible? Dr. Malrich whispered to her companions. He created fear from nothing. No actual predator was needed. Captain. Zethkar watched Ben take a bow as the audience clapped nervously. The human teacher had just shown that his species understood fear better than creatures who lived by causing it. A teenage girl named Amy Collins walked onto the stage next. She was only 17 years old, with long blonde hair and a cheerful smile. She looked completely harmless. "Hi, everyone," Amy said in a sweet voice. "I want to share some urban legends that kids at my school talk about. These are stories about creatures that hunt in our modern world." Amy began telling stories about monsters that lived in cities. She described beings that stalked people through subway tunnels and empty parking garages. Her tales were filled with details about how predators adapted to human environments. "The best hunters," Amy explained casually, "are the ones that look normal until it's too late. They study their prey and learn human behavior patterns. They know when people are alone and vulnerable." Commander Thias realized that this teenage human was describing infiltration techniques that his own species considered top-secret military knowledge. But Amy talked about them like they were entertainment for children. Amy told stories about creatures that could mimic human voices to lure victims into traps. She described how predators used human social behaviors against them. She explained how the best hunters were invisible until the moment they struck. The three aliens sat in stunned silence as a 17-year-old human girl demonstrated knowledge of advanced predatory tactics. These humans were not innocent creatures, sharing harmless stories. They were something else entirely, something that understood predators better than predators understood themselves. Jake Morrison walked toward the three aliens with his hands open and empty. He moved slowly so they would not think he was attacking. The aliens were much bigger and scarier than he had expected from their messages. But Jake had been taught to be polite to visitors. "My name is Jake Morrison," he said. "I work for the human government. We are happy you came to visit us." Captain Zethkar looked down at the small human. Jake barely came up to the alien's chest. The captain could crush this weak creature with one hand, but something about Jake's calm voice made him pause. "I am Captain Zethkar of the Starfall," the alien said. His voice was deep and rough like rocks grinding together. "These are Dr. Malrix and Commander Theiss. We have come to learn about your people." Jake nodded and smiled. "That's wonderful. The town of Cedar Falls is just a short walk from here. Everyone is excited to meet you." Dr. Malrix stepped forward on her 8 legs. Her black eyes studied Jake like he was an insect she might eat. "Are you not afraid of us, human?" Jake looked up at the giant spider creature. Her fangs dripped with poison and her claws were sharp enough to cut bone, but he just kept smiling. "Should I be afraid?" Jake asked. "You came here in peace. You asked to learn about our culture. That makes you guests, not enemies." Commander Theiss sniffed the air around Jake. The wolf-like alien could smell emotions through chemical signals. Most creatures gave off fear scents when they met his kind, but Jake smelled calm and friendly. "This human shows no fear," Theiss said to his companions. "Either he is very brave or very stupid." "Maybe both," Dr. Malrix replied, "or maybe humans are too simple to understand danger." Jake pretended he had not heard their comments. He started, walking toward the town, and waved for them to follow. "The festival starts in 1 hour. You'll get to see how humans share stories with each other." The 3 aliens walked behind Jake through fields of green grass and flowers. They passed farms, with cows and horses grazing peacefully. Everything looked soft and harmless. There were no walls or weapons or guard towers. "Where are your defenses?" Captain Zethkar asked. "How do you protect this place from attack?" Jake turned around while still walking. "Attack from who? We don't have any enemies around here. The nearest city is 200 miles away, and they're our friends too." The aliens looked at each other with confusion. Every world they had conquered was full of creatures fighting for territory and resources. But these humans seemed to live without any fear of attack. Soon they reached the edge of Cedar Falls. It was a small town with neat houses and tree-lined streets. People were setting up tables and chairs in the town square. Children ran around, playing games while adults hung colorful decorations. A woman with gray hair and a friendly face came over to greet them. She was about 50 years old and wore a simple blue dress. Her name was Susan Blake, and she was the mayor of Cedar Falls. "Welcome to our town," Susan said to the aliens. "We are honored to have visitors from space. I hope you enjoy our festival." "Captain," Zethkar stared down at the small human woman. She should be terrified of him. His own people would fall to their knees in fear when he approached. But Susan just smiled up at him like he was a neighbor coming for dinner. "You are not afraid," he said. It was not a question. "Of course not," Susan replied. "Jake told us you came here to learn about human stories. Anyone who loves stories can't be all bad." Dr. Malrix moved closer to Susan. The spider alien's poison could kill 100 humans in minutes, but Susan did not step back or show any sign of worry. "Your species has no survival instincts," Dr. Malrix said. "How did you live long enough to develop space communication?" Susan laughed. "Oh, we have plenty of survival instincts. We just don't think we need them right now. Would you like some lemonade? It's fresh made." Commander Theiss growled softly. "This makes no sense. These humans act like they have never seen a predator before." "Maybe they haven't," Captain Zethkar said quietly. "Maybe their world is so safe they forgot how to be afraid." Jake led them to chairs set up near a small stage in the town square. People were gathering around to watch the festival begin. There were families with children, old people with walking sticks, and teenagers holding hands. "The first story will be told by Helen Porter," Jake explained. "She has been the town librarian for 30 years. She knows more stories than anyone else in Cedar Falls." An old woman with white hair and kind eyes stepped onto the stage. She looked to be about 70 years old and moved slowly with the help of a wooden cane. Helen Porter had spent her whole life reading books and telling stories to children. "Welcome, everyone," Helen said in a clear voice. "Today I want to share an old story that many of you know. It's about a little girl who met a wolf in the forest. The aliens sat up straighter in their chairs. Finally, they would hear a human war story. They expected to learn about hunting tactics and battle strategies. Helen began to tell the story of Little Red Riding Hood. She spoke about a young girl walking through the woods to visit her grandmother. She described the dark forest and the dangerous wolf who wanted to eat the girl. Dr. Malrix listened with scientific interest. The human was describing predator behavior, but something about the story bothered her. Helen talked about the wolf's thoughts and plans with too much detail. The wolf was clever, Helen said. He knew the girl would be afraid if she saw his true nature, so he hid behind trees and followed her without making a sound. He thought about the best way to catch her. Commander Thiss felt uncomfortable. This old human woman was describing hunting techniques that his own people considered advanced secrets. How could she know such things? The wolf understood fear, Helen continued. He knew that fear could make creatures do stupid things, so he planned to use the girl's fear against her. Captain Zethkar's claws dug into his chair. The human storyteller was explaining psychological warfare tactics that the Vorthak military had developed over centuries, but she spoke about them like they were common knowledge. Helen finished her story with the wolf being defeated by a clever woodsman. The humans in the audience clapped and smiled. Children laughed at the funny parts, but the three alien predators sat in silence. They had expected to hear simple tales from a primitive species. Instead, they had listened to a detailed analysis of predator psychology told by an elderly librarian. Something was very wrong with these humans. The stars grew dim as the massive ship moved through space toward the blue planet. Captain Zethkar stood on the bridge looking at the world below. His yellow eyes studied the planet called Earth. His claws tapped against the metal rail as he thought about what they would find there. Zethkar was not like the soft creatures on the planet below. He stood 9 feet tall with dark green scales covering his body. Sharp teeth filled his mouth, and his claws could cut through steel. His people had conquered 3 star systems by fighting and killing their enemies. They were the strongest hunters in their part of space. The ship Starfall carried other dangerous beings, too. Dr. Malrix walked up behind the captain on 8 legs. Her body looked like a giant spider with black skin that shined in the light. Poison dripped from her fangs that could melt metal in seconds. Her people had killed entire armies by using their deadly venom. Commander Thiss came to stand beside them. He looked like a huge wolf walking on 2 legs. His fur was gray, and his teeth were as long as knives. His nose could smell fear from miles away. His people hunted across whole planets until they caught what they wanted. These 3 species had made a deal to work together. They respected each other because they all knew how to kill. They had come to Earth to meet another race of warriors. At least that was what they thought they would find. For many weeks, they had listened to signals coming from Earth. The humans sent music and words and pictures into space. The aliens had studied these signals to learn about human culture. But what they found made no sense to them. The humans did not seem to talk about war or hunting. Instead, they gathered in groups to share stories. The aliens watched through their machines as humans sat around fires telling tales. They saw humans in big buildings watching other humans pretend to be different people. They found places full of books where humans went to read stories. This confused the alien hunters. Where were the battle plans? Where were the training grounds? Where were the weapons? All they could find were humans talking about things that never happened. Dr. Malrix had run tests on the human signals. Her 8 eyes looked at the data on her screen. Captain, these humans are very strange. They do not seem to be warriors at all. They are weak and small. They have no natural weapons. Zethkar growled deep in his throat. That cannot be right. Every intelligent species we have found has been strong fighters. These humans must be hiding their true nature. Commander Thiss sniffed the air even though they were still in space. Maybe they used tricks instead of strength. Some prey animals try to fool hunters. The captain decided they needed to make contact with the humans. He wanted to see these strange beings for himself. The ship moved closer to Earth and sent a message using the same type of signals the humans used. Down on Earth, a young man named Jake Morrison sat at his desk in a small room full of machines. He worked for the Human Defense Force, but his job was not fighting. He listened to signals from space and tried to understand them. When the alien message came through his machines, he almost fell out of his chair. Jake was 28 years old with brown hair and green eyes. He was not very tall or very strong. He had never been in a real fight in his life. But he was good at understanding different languages and solving problems. The alien message was not easy to understand at first, but Jake worked on it for hours, until he could make sense of it. The aliens wanted to meet humans and learn about their culture. They said they came in peace and wanted to be friends. Jake sent the message to his boss, and soon many important people were talking about what to do. Some wanted to bring the aliens to big cities or military bases, but Jake had a different idea. He had grown up in a small town where people were friendly to strangers. He thought about how his grandmother always invited new neighbors for dinner. Maybe the aliens would understand humans better if they saw how normal people lived. Jake sent a message back to the aliens. He invited them to visit a small town called Cedar Falls, where there would be a storytelling festival. He told them it would show them real human culture. On the alien ship, Captain Zethkar read the human message. He did not understand what a storytelling festival was. Dr. Malrix looked up the words in their database of human language. "It seems to be a gathering where humans share fictional tales," she said. "They tell stories that are not real." Commander. This tilted his head like a confused dog. Why would warriors waste time with lies? Zethkar thought about this. Maybe the humans use stories to teach battle tactics. Maybe their tales were really lessons about how to fight. Or maybe this was some kind of trap. "We will go to this festival," he decided. "But we will be ready for anything. These humans may be more dangerous than they appear." The three aliens prepared to visit Earth. They checked their weapons and made sure their ship was ready to leave quickly if needed. They did not trust these strange humans who seemed to have no interest in war or hunting. As their small shuttle flew down to Earth, Zethkar looked out at the green and blue world below. Somewhere down there, humans were gathering to tell stories. The captain had conquered many worlds and faced many enemies, but something about these humans made him feel uneasy. He could not understand why creatures so weak and defenseless had survived long enough to build cities and send signals into space. Every other species the aliens had met was either strong enough to fight or smart enough to hide. Humans seemed to do neither, but Captain Zethkar had learned to trust his instincts over many years of hunting. And his instincts told him that something was not right about the humans. They were hiding something important. Something that might be very dangerous. The shuttle landed in a field outside the small town. Jake Morrison was waiting for them with a smile on his face. He did not look afraid, even though he was facing three of the most deadly predators in the galaxy. "Welcome to Earth," Jake said as the aliens stepped out of their shuttle. "We're excited to share our stories with you." Captain Zethkar studied the young human carefully. Jake looked soft and harmless. But the alien captain had the feeling that this meeting would change everything he thought he knew about strength and power.